I grew up in Bihar, where if you followed rules, you would get no service. But that was Bihar long time back. I shouldn't be saying these things here. Yes, sir. Sorry? Robust industrial growth, and I'm going to come back to that. Absolutely good point. Sorry, a little louder. All kinds of? Yeah, all kinds of technologies we should be leaders. I think that's a great point. Any other points? Yes, sir.
I hope two public goods, education and health, is available. Two public goods, education and health, is available to everybody.
Absolutely. Education, and Mr. Krishnamurthy has stolen the last line of my session, which is education and health and skills and jobs available to all. I think that is, to my mind, the true sign of a developed nation. Anything else that comes to your mind? Sorry? Modernize. Okay. And you will come to that. I think that's a good point. And in fact, I am going to ask you during this session, what is the definition of a modern city or a modern planet? And we'll talk about that as we go along. Great. So let's get started. So we are basically talking about this, pathways to a robust and inclusive India, the point that you made on inclusion. This is just to give you a context. Uma talked about a book called Nari Shakti, which both of us collaborated on, which was published, the last publication of Pune International Center. PIC is one of India's most successful think tanks. We do tremendous amount of research. I look after the publications of PIC, so most of the books are kind of either co-authored or managed by me. And it also, of course, is run by two very distinguished Padma Vibhushans, Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar and Dr. Vijay Kelkar, both of whom I think need no introduction. And our basic goal has been to see how we can get enlightened ourselves and spread some kind of that knowledge into the planet. So that's the idea. So this is actually the last 5 years of publishing that we have done. As you can see, 2020, again, Uma and I collaborated on writing a book on digital success. In the Dassault system presentation, they talked about redefining or rethinking digital success. That was actually the theme of our book. Because we found that like AI today, there was so much hype around about digital that if you looked at the research, hardly 20% of the people who implemented digital in their organizations, and this is both manufacturing, financial services, healthcare, actually got the results that they thought they would get to digital. So this book was an analysis of what goes wrong sometimes, what are those pitfalls in implementing digital that you should look at. Around that time, if you remember 2021, something big happened. The whole Pangong Lake in Ladakh, and China came and squatted on that territory. And we all know that our army gave a magnificent response, as they have recently done with Operation Sindoor. So I think that is something that happened. So that is the time when 6 of us, Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Kelkar, Ajit Ranade, who's been one of our India's the economic advisor to the Birla Group for many years, Gautam Bambawale, who was the ambassador to China, me and a gentleman from Bombay called Ajay Shah, who actually his father set up the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. It was COVID time. Most of us were working from home. So we used to literally meet on Zoom 2 hours every Sunday. And we said, what should be, in the long term, India's response to China? So we wrote a book called Facing Up to the China Challenge, which was the first big publication from the Pune International Center. And interestingly, the first protest we got, I remember, when we wrote the book and it became a very big success, was from the Chinese ambassador to India. And he said, look, you guys are being too critical of China. We do so much work for the world, etc., etc. We also got a call from one of the ministries in India. And they said, look, it's a nice book. You've written about China and compared in various aspects and what we can do to compete, succeed, etc. Why don't you now write a book on India and say, what should we be doing in the future? And this was before the word Viksit Bharat was coined. So we actually started thinking about India's future. That's the book I'm going to talk to you about, which is Facing Up to India. To bring you up to date, because as you can see, Pathways to Success is 3 years old. But I wrote a book called A Passage Through Life, which was inclusion. So actually talking about my village friend in Tatisilvai, Ranchi, whose name was Fantush. And while I moved out of Tatisilvai, Ranchi to study in Mumbai and the US and everywhere else, Fantush stayed back in Tatisilvai, Ranchi, and he's not been included in that sense. He's still managing on a salary of maybe 6,000 rupees per month or whatever. He's happy. And I remember, I just must share this anecdote with you, I reunited with Fantush about 10 years ago. And then, of course, we started exchanging phone calls and et cetera, et cetera. And if you remember, demonetization happened, whenever that happened about a few years ago. And the first call I got was from this boy called Fantush from Tatisilbai village in Ranchi. Because demonetization had happened. And he asked me, sir, aap theek to hai na? In his typical Bhojpuri accent. I said, yaar, main to theek hoonga, mere ko kya problem hai? He said, sunne mein aaya hai कि मुकेश अंबानी भी राशन के लाइन में खड़ा हुआ है. I'm like, why is a man in Bihar worried about whether Mukesh Ambani is suffering or not? Obviously very untrue, but unfortunately 70% of India survive on the myths they hear about the destruction of wealth somewhere else. What we need, ladies and gentlemen, is a nation where everybody is looking positively forward. And to my mind, that is one definition of Viksit Bharat. So that's something we talked about, all facets of development. So the inclusion priorities that I wrote in this little, it's actually a novel built around myself and Fantush. And we kind of obviously changed the story a little bit. So that was what was written. And finally, I mean, right now we are publishing 2 books. One is on Viksit India, and we're calling it Viksit India, not Viksit Bharat, for a reason, which will be published probably next month. And finally, Uma and I are again collaborating on a book called Leadership Through AI. That in spite of or because of artificial intelligence, machine learning, everything that Devina mentioned, what can we in manufacturing, in all sectors of the economy, take from that as an essence of making better leadership possible? So we're looking at the leadership paradigm, and that is where all of you would come in, saying AI is not to be left to the techies, but AI is something we can embrace to make ourselves better leaders. So that's the kind of genesis of what we're doing. And let me plunge into this. First of all, why must I am an absolute optimist about India. I believe that in spite of all our challenges, in spite of much of the fake news that sometimes come around, we still have a very, very strong vision for the future. And we actually wrote about this even in 2022. 2 or 3 reasons. Okay, one is, you've all heard of the JAM Trinity, which is Jandhan, Aadhaar, Mobility. Amazing success story. My good friend Nandan Nilekani, I mean, when he created the whole Aadhaar movement and then of course UPI, even he would not have imagined the kind of absorption or the kind of adoption of UPI we've seen in this country. I mean, today, I was telling somebody in America that, like in Chicago about 6 months ago, early morning flight, 6:30 in the morning, I reached the airport. And I told this woman at the counter that, look, I need a cup of coffee. And she said, that'll be $3. I said, fine. So I gave her a $5 bill. Okay. She said, I'm sorry, I need $3. I said, look, I'm giving you $5. You can give me $2 back. And she said, how does that work? So I said, no, 5 minus 3 is 2 would be too much to say. But it's still very much cash. A credit card machine was not working. She couldn't calculate. So she said, sorry, I can't do this. India, switch forward to last week. I was playing golf in Pune, and early morning, 6:30, I reached the little tea shop and said, Bhaiya, chai dena? And he said, 20 rupees. So I gave him 100 rupees. He said, sir, GPay karo na. A little totally uneducated guy saying, I have my QR code. And so I'm saying, if you look at QR codes everywhere, I believe, and I don't know if it's true or not, but even Varanasi, even the holy cows have QR codes on their back. So I don't know if somebody is nodding, so maybe it's true. So you can just do a QR code and make a donation. I mean, amazing this country, the way it progresses in some directions. Banking and financial, I'm a very proud director of the State Bank of India. Financial institutions are more robust than ever before. Okay, so an amazing story of how we have seen banking and financial services evolve. Very young company, favorable demographics. Of course, the cynics might argue that, look, boss, if you don't give these 200 million kids jobs, then it's a demographic dividend might become a demographic nightmare. So something we need to be concerned about, without a doubt. And there is a manufacturing resurgence. Let me ask you another question. If you look at the 3 big sectors of India, okay, services, agriculture, and manufacturing, which one do you think or do you know has the largest share of GDP? Services, right? After that, sorry? So how much is manufacturing, and all of you are manufacturing professionals, how much is manufacturing as a percentage of GDP today? Sorry? Maybe 16 is right. There was a time when we were saying that, look, India should achieve 30% of GDP in manufacturing. So very sadly, manufacturing as a percentage of GDP has been steadily declining. I come from the services sector. I mean, like Uma, I also started my career in Crompton Greaves. But after the first 5 years, I've been in IT and education, various services right throughout my life. I'm proud to be from services. But manufacturing is where the Fantushas of the world will get jobs in large abundance. Okay? So there is no doubt that manufacturing needs to be 30% of the economy if India has to succeed. China grew at a galloping pace of 10% per year over 2 decades. That comes from our China book. And primarily by focusing on becoming the factory of the world. So India, that's still a problem. We'll talk a little bit more about it. But there is a PLI-led manufacturing resurgence. Again, not as dramatic as we would have liked it to be, but it's happening. So when people criticize and say, oh, what is Apple doing? They're making cell phone covers in India, value addition is less than 10%. Doesn't matter. If Apple is making cell phone covers in India, slowly there will be vertical integration, slowly more components will be manufactured. So it's all a beginning. So I think it's a good beginning. And of course, last but not the least, Operation Sindoor has given us another reason to thump our chests. Okay? So I'm saying there's a lot to be positive about in terms of the way we have talked to the world, the way Prime Minister Modi is becoming a world statesman, the way Jaishankar does great work, Ashwini Vaishnav, our own minister in IT, does good work. So there are some very good things happening about India. So that's no doubt. I'll talk a few things about my concerns for India, but we will keep the pessimism to a little later in this session. By the way, stop me anytime you have a question. I'm not particularly fond of long lecture and Q&A, so anytime you have a question, just raise your hand. Agriculture imperatives, I mean, most of you are not from agriculture, so I won't spend time on this, but this is a problem. 20% of GDP, and this was 3 years back, it may have gone up or down a little bit, 52% of the population. Now, 52% of the population engaged in producing 20% clearly speaks about terrible productivity in agriculture. I mean, we have multiple things. I mean, you all heard about the farm bills that didn't really take off. We believe there's a lot of imperatives, and we've written a full chapter in the book on this, saying, water availability is a big problem. Our water table is eroding at a very rapid pace in the country. Non-food produce, which was one of the intents of that farm bill, saying if everybody produces rice and white and paddy, first of all, the excess material rots in the Food Corporation of India godowns. And what we could be producing to make farms, 1.25 acre farmland, more productive for the young farmer is not happening. So I think that's a bit of an issue. So there is a problem. We also need some progressive and stable, when I say stable policies, you can't wake up every day and say, now you can export, now you can't export, now you can export, now you can't export. So there has to be some consistency of policy. And I think there are steps being taken in that direction, but long, long way to go. So the agriculture economist who wrote this chapter along with us, he was pretty unhappy about what's happening. And I hope that things will stabilize and improve much more as we go along. Manufacturing, your area. I mean, whether we like it or not, ladies and gentlemen, we have huge asymmetries with China. Okay, and now China has palled up with Trump again, the first country to really sign this trade treaty. So you will find that China again becomes the darling of the world. So all the hopes we had that we will be China +1, India plus, and we will be the alternative destination to the world, sorry, we have to work much harder. If you remember, even in the early days when China was going out of fashion, the people who caught all that offshoot of China was Thailand and Vietnam, not so much India. Okay, so I think Indian companies have to figure out how to scale much, much faster and make a real impact. And I think that goes without saying that that's happening. If you look at the SME sector, and I do a lot of work with MSMEs as part of this Maratha chamber in Pune, and the SME sector is still struggling. I mean, the MSME very much so. I mean, technology, Industry 4.0, all of you have heard of, and all of you have probably implemented with MES and everything else in your factories, has kind of evaded the MSME sector. And I remember trying to do this when I was running this company called Zensar, working on implementing SAP manufacturing for SMEs. But the point is, look, we are finding it so tough to make profits that where do we have the ability to automate processes or manufacturing or whatever. So I think that's been a bit of an issue. The big areas, of course, are still, the potential areas are still electronics, which is one of the first big PLI areas to take off. Automotive components, where I think we are doing well. I mean, I'm not talking about not automobiles. I mean, automobiles also, I think today a company like Bajaj Auto, a phenomenal market share in the world. So I think we're very proud of this company, Bajaj Auto. And I'm sure many more are coming through. The EVs, for instance, while China is super dominant today in EVs, again an opportunity for India, especially EV two-wheelers and so on and so forth. Chemicals and pharmaceuticals, I mean, I must say that chemicals, China is way, 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 way ahead of anybody in the world. I mean, I'm sure many of you have been to China. If you see the chemical parks they've set up, I mean, it's almost like a full country set up for chemical manufacturing. And while we are proud of the fact that our pharma industry is now taking off, I was an advisor to Sun Pharma for a couple of years, and Dilip Shangvi and other visionaries have all decided that, look, we can't import APIs or active pharmaceutical ingredients from China for the rest of our lives. So API manufacturing has started in this country. But if you peel the onion, you'll find that API, most of the chemicals are still coming from China. So at the end of the day, China in the loop is not easy to eliminate. And I think Indian government was smart enough to say that, look, we're not going to fight against China and say we will not import from China. Maybe we won't import toys or ready-made stuff. But basic stuff that China has still got, like rare earths, for instance, cannot be wished away, and I think there's no need to wish it away. I mentioned this, China to China plus, I mean, labor-centric manufacturing, I don't know, because some people say that train has left the station. Because today, without industrial automation, I mean, I chair Honeywell in India, and I spend a lot of time in the US. I mean, the kind of work we are doing on industrial automation, especially process automation, AI at the edge, and AI-enabled process manufacturing. I mean, there a time will come when most factories will not need a single human being. Okay, so labor-centric manufacturing, what China did in Shenzhen with toys and clothes and everything else. Again, unfortunately, our share of the global textile market is dwindling very substantially. It should be going up. Even manufacturing overall. Does anybody have a percentage of what is the global manufacturing output percentage that is done from India? Anybody? Sir? Huh? You're absolutely right, sir. It's 2.9%, which is abysmal. I mean, we must have an ambition to be 10% of the world's manufacturing, before we can claim what China very rightly claims to be the factory of the world. So clearly that's an area of concern for all of us. Services, let me talk a little bit about this. This we know that, I mean, today there are 5.3 million people working in tech. IT services, we can proudly claim to be 53% global market share as compared to 2.9% in manufacturing. But the problems of services have also been, I'm just talking about IT, but of course services includes a lot more. It includes financial services, include government services, so that's why the percentage is so high, not because of one small IT services. But because of the IT revolution in India, I mean, obviously the top 5 cities benefited right from the 80s, but our urbanization and agglomeration is really happening in clusters. I mean, today we look at the mess in Bangalore in terms of traffic. Pune, okay, where it could take 20 minutes 20 years back to go from one end of the city to the other, today it can take you 1 hour 45 minutes. I mean, when I drive back today from Bombay to Pune, if I reach Pune after 5:30, it might take me 1.25 hours within Pune to reach home. So it will be roughly 1/20th of the distance I would have traveled so far. So I think that's the problem we are facing in the country because of excessive aggregation in Pune. I mean, when I moved to Pune about 20 years ago, the entire population was about 18 lakhs. Today the population of Pune is touching 1 crore. Infrastructure, very little has changed. Okay, so I think these are the issues that we're facing. Uniform infrastructure spread, as I said, I mean, if you look at the congestion costs, we'll have to look at a lot more work happening on digital, the national optic fiber network, etc., which is beginning to happen. That's why digital India is a success story. Physical India, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm very proud of what's happening in Bombay, the coastal line, everything else. Look at the road network that is coming up across the country. The rail network is phenomenal. Air network we won't talk about because of yesterday's incident, but the number of domestic airports, I was in Kolhapur airport recently. I mean, very proud to see that airport. So I think we're substantially changing, but still we are a long way to go to compete on infrastructure. The competitive advantage of English in education, which of course has happened in the cities, still not prevalent in the small sectors so much. That is something we look at. And of course, if you look at the IT industry, we have chat GPT and artificial intelligence, automation. Like in manufacturing, this is a threat for the services sector also. So this is as far as services comes. All this is what we wrote in our book, so I'm just giving you a summary. So pathways to success, one of the biggest problems we have in our country is science, technology and innovation, what we call STI. Do you know what is the percentage investment in R&D out of our GDP? 2, 3%, what do you think it is? R&D. So you know the answer. You know every answer to the decimal place. Tell me. I'll give you 2 decimal places. It's 0.67%. China, 3.5%. US, 3%. Our investment in research, ladies and gentlemen, is appalling. And if we want to be a product economy, we want to do great things, we want to be inventors for the world, how can we do this with this kind of research? That's a big issue. Okay, so research institutions, I mean, people blame the 60s saying that, look, we had these research institutions separate, they're not funded properly, academic institutions don't do research, look at Stanford, etc. All these are excuses. End of the day, somebody has to bite the bullet and say, let's invest deep in research. And I'm not talking only about government. It also has to be industry. Because if industry doesn't do research, we can very easily succeed and have market share and shareholders happy. But are we building something from India, make in India for the future? That's something we really have to be worried about. Because it's obviously a direct linkage to manufacturing. Building the scientific temper, building science and technology-led entrepreneurship. I mean, I only invest nowadays in scientific entrepreneurs. I mean, there's an amazing woman called Parul Ganju, set up a drug research company in Pune just about 8 years ago. It's called Ahamyun. Today, Ahamyun is valued at 260 crores. I'm so proud of that girl. So it's people like Parul, it is 1,000 entrepreneurs doing scientific research in India, funded by venture capital, funded by people like me, funded by whoever. I think that is what will build the future of this country. And of course, I mentioned this earlier, if you do that, then you can not only encourage, but also see innovations in products, processes, and business models happening. And that's extremely important for all of us. Mobility, I talked about cities. Cities, our biggest problem, as we said, is mobility. I mean, what's the point in having a car if it's going to move at an effective rate of 1 kilometer per 10 minutes? So that's a big problem. The last point is very important. The last point is actually by the mayor of Bogota, who says a developed country is not a place where the poor have cars. It is a place where the rich use public transportation. How many of us, ladies and gentlemen, came to this in either the metro or the normal rail? No, we prefer to drive our cars, maybe we have drivers, etc. And it's an attitude. I mean, I'm as guilty as any of you. The Pune metro has been around for 3 years, I've never even got into it. Okay, so I'm saying we have to lose this habit of, whereas we have a home in New York and we live 4 months of the year in New York. When you go to New York, we don't even take a cab, forget about driving our own car. Because the public transportation system is so intensely good. Okay, the subway system, the bus system, everything is just fantastic. In India, we are getting there, but attitudes will hopefully take maybe 1 generation before people start using public transport and before public transport is truly available in all the cities. So I think that's a big issue that we're having. But that's why I said the large growth in public-private vehicles, what we've written here, is largely due to lack of adequate public transportation. Transforming the mobility sector, obviously we cannot afford to pollute the planet more than we have. So there is CNG happening, there is hybrid vehicles happening, there is EV happening, but again, not enough. And unfortunately, with what we are seeing in the US, where there's almost like a move back to fossil fuels, we need to push forward for that. So the hydrogen economy that Prime Minister Modi has been talking about, I think a lot of areas like this, we have to see how to make it happen. Pathways to success, I mean, the $1 trillion, I mean, this is something that we know, but I'll just repeat it. I mean, we need more broadband highways. I mean, even today, unfortunately, I mean, while you may get tremendous connectivity with Wi-Fi in this hotel, if you, for instance, I was experimenting this in Lucknow. I mean, you got like 50 Mbps on internet in the city of Lucknow. If you travel 20 kilometers into UP, it will drop like so substantially that, you know, you see this great asymmetry between semi-rural India, rural India, etc. So ultimately, success will happen like it's happened in Kerala. I mean, Kerala, you can get 60 Mbps internet anywhere in the state. So we need this to happen across the country. So that's one on digital. AI, of course, is going to be a big investment area. Yesterday there was a BBC interview that I was watching last night, which says that, look, the AI absorption in India is probably better than anywhere else in the world. Absorption. Not innovation yet, but at least we are becoming a very large AI digital kind of economy. Core ICT, which is the manufacturing and design services. So that's a huge opportunity, which India is currently very, very small at. Microprocessors, Micron, companies are coming in. Tata Group is investing big time, but a lot more to be done. The platform economy, as we call it, that everything will be digital platforms. Today, the payment gateways are the biggest digital platform we have. So India's payment system, as I said earlier, is second to none. But effectively, digital will truly impact the country if every aspect of the economy, manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, entertainment, skills, are all embracing digital. And in our book currently we're writing on leadership through the art of AI, we're writing exactly that how can AI take every sector and make impact so that we really see the benefit for civilization as we go along. So last couple of slides and then we'll stop and take questions. Areas which need focus, just to summarize what I already said, much better productivity. Today our farm productivity, our factory productivity, our services productivity, by the way, IT sector, we keep joking internally that look, 20% of the 5.3 million people employed are not adding productive value. They're there because somebody else will make a mistake and we have to correct it. So we have to get it right the first time, okay, whether we do it in any sector of the economy. Participation of women, which Uma talked about, I think that's a big issue and we've discussed this in the morning, so I won't repeat it. But there's a full chapter in our book we wrote about this. How do we encourage more women to participate? The kind of pathways that, let's say, an ICICI created, right from Mr. Kamat's time 20 years ago, to really build pathways, be very encouraging, supportive when somebody has to give up a job, social norms, all those issues are very, very important and we need to continually discuss with them, and the response you people showed in terms of your own policies towards women is very, very encouraging. Honestly, I have never seen such positive responses. Most of it has been below 30%, 20%, but today I saw very good. So I hope that many of you are part of the enlightened group which is making stuff happen. Corporate investment has to go up, no question, as I mentioned already. FDI, still not good enough. I mean, there's a lot of investment coming through off and on in our stock markets, but that's, as you know, very fickle investment. We have to get serious foreign investment like China did for many, many years into our manufacturing economy. We have to quell divisive noises in the country. Thanks to social media, there is a critic for everything and there are very few positive comments that we get. Okay, so I think the positivism, and I'm not talking about extreme bhaktism, I'm talking about genuine, well-informed positivism, like I just told you about the country. It's so much good that can happen, and how do we work together to make it happen? And the point you were making, inclusion. Inclusion of the Fantushas around the world, around the country in the growth story, so that they don't sit on the sidelines and watch India grow. Bharat must grow as well as India. That's the only reason why we'll be called a successful economy. Miles to go before we sleep. I think we have problems of castes and we have classes, we have communities. I mean, we have too many reasons to not include people. I'm not even talking about gender here. I do a lot of work with an entity, NGO in Pune, in Bombay called Educate Girls, run by this amazing woman called Safina Hussain. And we work primarily with tribal girls across Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bihar, starting in 10 more states in the next 2 years. And you'll be amazed how many girls in tribal areas who dropped out of school due to COVID because the schools closed, 70% didn't go back. Why? Because the father found it was very easy to get the girl to do menial work at home, help in the farm. So a lot of farmers have kind of retired and left it to their wives and daughters to run the farm. So there was a point I mentioned which I didn't talk about called feminization of agriculture. You could be proud of feminization of agriculture, but the sad reality is it's been just abdicated by men towards women. And all that needs to change. So I think putting girls back into school, what we call out-of-school girls, is probably the single most thing that we have to do in the country, because that makes stuff happen better. Rural and urban slum youth, we do a lot of work today in 5 states on getting slum youth to come in and participate, have the same aspiration as rich youth, and not be jealous of rich youth. So I think that's something that is a long work to be done. Aspirational districts in India, as you know, there are some really, really poor districts like Gadchiroli, not far in Maharashtra, for instance, and there are so many others where development has almost not happened. So a lot of impetus by the government, but again something that we as responsible Indians have to be concerned about. And the question that we have to ask ourselves, and in fact, I will probably end this session by saying, think what you can do. That's why I said, I started off by saying, what Modi ji can do, we all know. But what we in our own little capacities can do, I think that can make the country. And one thing I realize about India is, we're too easy to criticize and not enough participation is happening. I'm not saying, give up your job and go into the social sector. But are we even understanding? I'm sure we are understanding. I mean, I keep asking the question, do you know how many children your maid has? Do you know what is their average income? Sometimes we don't know that also. Because it doesn't cross us that, look, she is somebody we should care about. Or your driver for that matter, or whoever. So I'm saying simple points, but let's try and see how we can make an iota of difference. So just to close, and then I'll take any questions or any comments you may have. I know I've been controversial, but the idea was to provoke you before lunch. This is the foreword that Mr. Narayan Murthy wrote in our book. And I'll read it out because I think it's so powerful. We need to empower the young people in India for their efforts to strengthen India's vibrant economy, and what Murthy wrote was right at the end, which is bring better hope for the poorest child in the most distant villages of the country. So ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about pathways to India's success, going back to your earlier point, that if you can build a successful India, which is bright on all sectors, which has good productivity, at the same time gives jobs to as many of our Indians as possible, inclusion will happen, and I think we can all live happily ever after. So thank you very much, and please ask questions. We still have 10-15 minutes, so you can ask questions. Any comments, questions, suggestions, please feel free. It'll go into my next book, I promise you. Come on, you can't be so quiet.
There's a question behind you, right?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
MSMEs, I already mentioned that. What structural support? I think structural support, first of all, they need tremendous support from OEMs. That I think all of you know. Because if I look at the Kirloskar group in Pune, for instance, I mean, there's so much of ecosystem support for tier 1 vendors, tier 2 vendors. Maruti, Suzuki used to do that for a long time, so I spent a lot of time with them to understand this. But sometimes a lot of MSMEs are on their own. Okay, they may have 1 or 2 captive customers, but that needs stuff. I think it's more of ecosystem support rather than structural support. And of course, easy financing, priority sector lending, all that we of course do as part of the State Bank and everywhere else. So I think that needs to be, but it's as I told you, it's 20% of the work done. There's a lot more to be done as we go forward. So I think that's very important.
More question behind you, sir.
Very difficult to answer this question without getting into trouble. But my problem is this, that if you do not encourage people to work, if you do not find work, give them work, there are lots of WhatsApp jokes floating around about saying that, look, a 17-year-old or a 21-year-old can get away today with free rations, with Manrega, with so many other things. But at some stage, the pride of saying, look, I'm doing something good for my family, that needs to come up. So I think the free schemes are good because, as you must have read in the recent statistics, I mean, India has moved more people out of the below poverty line than any other country has, which is very good news because we do have a huge BPL kind of population. But as I said, beyond the BPL, I mean, we have to encourage a lot more people to be part of the productive workforce. So I think that is where the free schemes is a double-edged sword. It's good for a short period of time, but long-term welfare schemes have to be replaced by genuine employment schemes. I think that's important. Any other questions directly? Any other questions? Please feel free. I can hear you from here. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Crimping even on Provident Fund, where is the question of payment? So I think somewhere in India, we have to find a way by which manufacturing jobs get created directly by manufacturing companies. Then manufacturing owners will take responsibility for training exactly the way you have done. So I think some companies like yours are enlightened. You will do that. And as you said, wait for results. But a lot of companies are saying, okay, I'll take contractor labor, not okay, we'll find somebody else. So it's becoming like a hire and fire in the US in a very different kind of sense. So I think that's something we need to think about. Sorry? The Japanese example is actually very good, Mr. Krishnamurthy is saying. Absolutely right.
There's
Yes.
one more question on the screen, sir, if you
sorry.
look at that.
startup hub of the world. I mean, this is, as I said, we hype everything, so we're very good. We are the best hypers in the world, okay. The reality is that startups are very slow to succeed. 98 point some % of startups fail, which nobody talks about. So we are very proud of the 100 companies that became unicorns or the $1 billion valuation, and that was very much hyped in Startup India, Stand Up India. But the reality is it takes time. Okay? And again, startups, like we mentioned about MSMEs, will need a lot of support. I do a lot of work on nurturing startups, but it's not easy. So are we the startup capital of the world? Far from it. Okay? Today in Israel, America are all much better in terms of taking startups to the next level. So we have to work on that. I mean, it's an ecosystem thing. Government, venture capital, startup capital, customers in India who want to buy from them, rather than just forcing them to buy in government through the GEMS portal. It has to happen by people being willing to support young companies. I think that's a change. Yes, sir.
So myself, Raghunath, I am from Biocon. So you talked about STI and you have shown the figure which was like literally shocking for me. The R&D investment, as you mentioned, it's only a 0.67%
Of GDP.
Like, yeah, of GDP. Like, what do you think? Because you mentioned China and US is 3%. Like, what do you think are the challenges? Is it a result? Because
Intent, attitude is the only challenge.
okay.
If somebody else is going to invest in research and I can quickly take that research and make products and make money for the stock market, why not? But it's a long-term player, Tata's for instance. Okay, I'm just saying Biocon, I'm sure Kiran is very actively involved in that. But people who are willing to invest for the next 50 years will do that today, knowing that there is no immediate result or immediate outcome, but take that forward. So scientific research, my daughter is a cancer scientist in Sloan Kettering in New York. Okay. But the amount of funding she's able to raise, till Trump of course, after Trump we have to see with the research funding is coming down there also. But it's amazing. So I mean when Dr. Mashalkar was asking her once, saying, why aren't you coming back to India and setting up your lab? Where is the funding? Yeah. Okay, because she's raising 30-40 million a year, dollars in funding. India, imagine somebody be able to raise that kind of money for cancer research funding. So I think that's the problem. So I think we have to think about it in a multi-dimensional way. Government, large investors, private equity has to invest in research. Will they do that? No. They want to make a quick buck and sell out in 5 years' time. So I think those are the problems we're facing. Not easy to solve.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions.
Sure.
Gentlemen here and then one more on the screen.
I'm Rakesh Sinha from Biologically. There is one phenomenon I have observed. Very successful companies, they compete in India, China, everywhere. They don't need tariff support, they don't need this support, that support. They are Indian origin. But in India, they want X, Y, Z. I need dumping duty, I need this, I need that. Why the same company competing in US with the world, the same company in India needs so much support from the public or the government? Why this differentiation?
There is a lovely line saying, "Puchne mein kya jata hai?" So, I mean, even our own industry, to be honest, okay, when we started off, and I remember Mr. Vittal was the secretary DOE, and I'm talking about 90s. Okay, so we went to him and said, "Boss, I mean, ours is a 400 crore industry. We want to grow." He said, "Give me a guarantee you'll make it 400 million in 3 years." So we said, "Bolne mein kya jata hai?" So we immediately said, "Yes, sir, no problem. 400 million done." Then we got the STPI scheme, we got tax-free, we got so many other things, and it really helped the industry. So I think every businessman saying, if I can get some benefits from the government, why not? Will they die if the government doesn't give them the benefit? No, but they'll still try. So that's where it is. So in a Vietnam, you will not get that benefit, or there is a published set of benefits. There's nothing you can do, jugaad and check and get it done. So I think that's the. But I don't think people are only waiting for somebody to give you subsidies or benefits. But if they can get it, of course they'll do it. That's how it is. The reason I grew up in Tata Silvai was my father was one of the co-founders of a chemical company in Calcutta called Waxpol Industries. And they moved to Tata Silvai because they were the poorest part of the country at that time, possibly even today. But, and they got huge benefits. Land was free, this was free, etc. Mr. Narayan Murthy, my good friend, I mean, he got 100 acres of free land in Pune, he got 100 acres of free land in Chennai. So if somebody is giving it to you, you're not going to say no, right? It's good for your shareholders. Last question, somebody said? Yeah.
It's on screen.
Oh, it's on the screen. Oh boy. We have time till tea for this question to answer this question. Let me try and be brief about this, because education, how do I say it kindly, is a mess in this country. I mean, if you go, I'm not talking about the Ambani school in Mumbai. That's great. My daughter studied in Manikji Cooper School in Juhu. That was fairly decent. But the minute you go below that, the minute you go to, for instance, the rural school in Tatisilvai that I kept talking about, there's no education, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, we do a lot of work in the tribal districts I mentioned. I mean, putting children back into school is one thing, but then we realize that putting children back into school is not solving the problem, because the school is so pathetic. So now we are doing school transformation in parallel to children's attitude changes, in parallel to parental attitude changes, in parallel to raising $100 million a year for making this happen. So it's that full ecosystem that needs to be done to get children to be motivated, and it's a chicken and egg, as I said. If the school is terrible, you're not going to go there. Yeah, I mean, Pune, for instance, 10 years back, we took up a large initiative that we will transform the girls' toilets in 300 municipal schools. Girls were dropping out of school because the toilets were so abysmal. And we don't care. So long as the teacher comes, how does it matter? Don't go to the loo when you're in school. So these are our attitudinal issues. So we have to look at a physical, cultural, mental transformation to make education happen. Similarly, I mean, today when we say that 87% of the engineers graduating in India are unemployable, that's an exaggeration created by my industry. But it's still true that 40% of the engineers in this country should not have got a degree in certificate. Not because of their fault, because the education has been so pathetic. Okay, so I'm saying that's clearly something we need to do. Otherwise, how do we create not just the IITians, but enough people to fuel the growth of the industry? Again, it's chicken and egg. Industry won't employ, so we don't need more people. People are not employable, so we don't need industry won't take them. So, I mean, we are faced with a number of paradoxes and conundrums in this country. That's why I said, that's why I'll close by saying that one assignment that the organizers asked me to give you is, please think deep and hard, not about what Modi ji can do, not about what the country can do, but what can I do to make a difference in the next 1 year? Believe me, you'll get great answers. I asked myself this question 10 years back, and I've never looked back. I mean, today I'm still on these 3 big boards, Honeywell, Hinduja, State Bank. I still do a lot of work in investing in the private sector, but 60% of my life is the social sector. And I was telling somebody, I think your speaker in the afternoon, that I mean, there is more joy in transforming 2.2 lakh slum youth in this country than there is in all the wealth you can make. So with due respect to personal investing and personal finance and personal wealth, make some money by all means, but then see what you can give back to the country. And on that political note, thank you very much.